Hey everybody, welcome to today's video, and this is one I've been meaning to do for a while, but it just kept slipping my mind, just kept forgetting it. And it's the last one in my series of my skill priority slash leveling guides, whichever you want to call them. They're about the same thing, but may mean something a little different to different players. The last class I have to cover here is the Marksman, and I feel kind of bad forgetting to do this video constantly, but I don't think it's ultimately the biggest deal in the long run because I don't think the usefulness of this video will be as high as the others because not nearly as many players are playing Marksman to the point where they'll be needing to know what skills really to pick past like tier 2. A huge variety of players seem to be dropping Marksman around Act 2, like myself. It's something I've recommended in the past due to this current performance problems they have, but they can really come back into their own if you decide to keep them into the end game, at least one of them for that soul merchant gear. And if that's the case, you're sitting on one marksman for that end game, then this will still be pretty useful for you because you'll want to know what skills you want to use. That's enough of an introduction though, so let's just start jumping into the characters and how I prioritize their skill order. Beginning with Sir Bors, who's probably the highest potential marksman in the game currently as of the Chain God patch. He's a pretty interesting one. He's definitely the easiest to stand out as kind of this unique case because of the skills he has available, and you'll see as we get to it. He is a completely neutral hero, and you unlock him in Act 2 around level 7 or 8, so he will have Tier 2 immediately available to him, and you're probably going to want to respec him at some point, because I'm pretty sure he does start with some not-so-great skills. Looking at this current skill tree, I think some of these are holdovers from that, because there's definitely some different skills I'd probably pick up if I was building this guy from the ground up. So the first thing you're going to want to grab in Tier 1 is definitely Poisoned Arrow, and the upgrades on this for increasing the weapon damage by 15%, having it apply vulnerability 20%, and Poison Blast, maybe. This one is sort of one of those skills that you're probably going to want to come back to later. It's in the 4th spot, so this won't even unlock until level 10, but I wouldn't pick this up right then, probably something you're going to want to come back to later. But definitely going to grab Poisoned Arrow, Toxic Arrow, and Sickness. Probably don't need Agony Shot yet, as well as Mark Target and Blink. Probably Evil Eye as well, just so that way it's a 30%. You won't use this a whole lot. This will mostly be for buffing his own damage in that given turn, but it can help for creating a little bit of a burst window. After that, grab the weak spots upgrade on your basic shoot attack, so that way you'll get a nice 20% damage bonus off of your self synergy with Poison Arrow. At that point, I think you should have spent plenty of skill points here to unlock Tier 2, so when you move into Tier 2, the first thing you're going to want is actually Alchemist. Reduce the AP cost on your poison skills by 1. That'll drop your poison arrow down to a 3 cost, which is actually a huge deal. This can make it, in my personal experience, this has come up many times where I've only been able to get 2 attacks in by making one of them poisoned arrow for the 1 AP cost reduction. Immediately grab the upgrades on that for Master Poisoner to increase the debuff and extra damage for the extra damage. Next, after that, grab Dash. It's an amazing mobility move. Every marksman is going to want this. It comes in handy so many times. Decrease the AP cost on it with Sprint, and increase the range on it with Extended Dash. Now, he does have a unique skill here, Skirmisher, that will grant him medium armor. This is unique to him, but ultimately, I found this doesn't make a huge difference for him as you're leveling. It will make him a little tankier if you're choosing to use him, so he's a little bit safer, but there isn't really a whole lot of medium gear that's really going to synergize with him as a marksman and boost his damage performance a whole lot compared to some of the other skills. Once you get later into the game, this is definitely a must-have. If you want to get it early, I think that's fine, while you're still in this Tier 2, but if you want to hold off on it and go with other stuff first and come back to this when you're at a higher level, I think that's also a very solid choice. The other skill here that I think is really worth taking is going to be First Shot. It's a decent damage bonus for that first attack of the turn. It's not anything great, but you're really going to want to try and get as many damage bonuses as possible stacking to make Marksman work. Once you reach tier 3, the first thing you're going to grab is Long Reach. Range is a very powerful advantage that ranged units have, being able to outrange enemy ranged units and just be able to snipe melee units from as far away as possible. So this is a must-have, as well as some upgrades on it, with Eagle Eye, an extra 10% damage if they're at least 6 tiles away, Disengage for another 10% if you're disengaged. This is a status effect where that will just apply. You won't really be able to tell, there's no indication, you'll just have to do counting if there's no enemies within 5 tiles. And then Prepared, 25% weapon damage for the first attack in the encounter. Again, it's only the first attack, but every bit of damage can really help Marksman since damage is where they're struggling. Following that up, I'd grab Smothering Shot, just because it's another ability that can be reduced down to a 3 AP cost, so more AP efficiency really does help Marksman go a much farther way. It's only 100% weapon damage, so it's not stronger than your basic shot, but it does come with a silence effect, so it is a useful CC for enemy spellcasters. With Quick Hand, that's what reduces it down to 3. You're definitely going to want that, as well as Burst Lungs, increase the damage. And I usually take Suffocation on it. This one I'd say isn't a must-have, but it is useful just to give a little bit more crowd control. Once you've picked these up, I would circle back around to get things like Scout, both of them, being able to do some repositioning without wasting your AP that would go towards your attacks. Marksmen are pretty tight on AP. This will really go a long way to helping maximize your performance with them, as well as the upgrade here, Recon, extra 2 movement AP on your first turn, and Evasive, reduce some incoming damage. After that, you're going to have some more skill points you can mess around with. These are what I would call sort of medium priority skills, things that I wouldn't say are things you should be picking up immediately as you're going through the leveling process, but things you can circle back for, such as Deflection, First Dodge, the upgrade here, things like Poison Blast. You're going to want Deadeye, and Elusive if you're planning to use your Marksman in the endgame with the Soul Merchant gear, then you'll take Elusive, otherwise just ignore it completely. Grabbing the cooldown reduction on your dash with Persistence. At this point, if you chose to hold off on getting Skirmisher, now is a good time to pick it up as well. Low priority skills slash skills I just wouldn't pick up at all at any point would be Poison Bomb. It's alright with the Soul Merchant gear, but honestly, I just think you can do better damage using your shoot attacks rather than Poison Bomb, and without the Soul Merchant gear, it's just atrocious. Cover Expert and its upgrades, again, I've kind of talked about these. If you want more detail, you can look at my skill breakdowns. It's just not great, and I don't think it's worthwhile going after. And Hunter. Before I moved on, I did also want to mention picking up Torture. This is also a really good one to pick up if you have someone that can set the burn status. If you have someone who can set the burn status that you're bringing in your party regularly that Pores can combo off of, this would be a pretty high priority ability. If not, I'd say it's probably medium. The next marksman on the list is going to be Sir Damas. He is Christian Tyrant alignment locked, so you will only encounter him if you go with that alignment combination. And you will unlock him in Act 2 as well, so he will also have a few skill points available, and you're definitely going to want to respec him when you first get him because he has some really not good ones. In Tier 1, pretty similar stuff. You're going to want to pick up Poison Arrow and the upgrades I mentioned before, such as Toxic Arrow and Sickness, grab Weak Spots. This is a pretty common staple to all the marksmen, so I'll not go as much depth on sort of the repeat skills that I established in Sir Bors. But what he does have unique to him is going to be Crippling Shot. This is a high AP skill. It starts at 6. But it's 150% weapon damage. So it's one of the highest base weapon damage skills out of all the marksmen. So it's kind of like his version of a single target nuke. Even though that's a little debatable. Has a low cooldown of 2 with the upgrade as well. So this is a skill you're definitely going to want on him. Grabbing barbed arrows is going to be something you want, as well as poisoned arrows. So it also applies poison. And after this, my math is bad, so if you still haven't unlocked Tier 2, I would go for Scout and then move on to Tier 2. If you haven't, or if you have unlocked Tier 2, then just Scout will be something you circle back to later, like I mentioned before. In Tier 2, it's sort of a lot of the same stuff. You're going to grab Alchemist, the 2 upgrades on it, because this will actually synergize with Poison Arrow and Crippling Shot. So you're going to want this Poison Arrow so it does get that synergy with Alchemist. And 5 AP is a lot, but much better than 6. Then you're going to grab Dash, same upgrades as last time, same order. But one thing I think you will want to pick up here is low profile. This fixes the tankiness problem that a lot of marksmen have. Enemy ranged units like to target your marksman because they're squishy. Well, with low profile, he'll pretty much never be targeted by enemy ranged units, so he becomes a much safer unit, and you really have to not worry about him nearly as much. And again, math is bad. If you haven't unlocked Tier 3 yet by this point, I would pick up First Shot. And but if you have, we'll go to Tier 3, and you can pick this up later. Just like before, the only thing here, though, you're going to want is Long Reach and the upgrades I mentioned previously. Again, Poison Bomb just isn't great. With the Soul Merchant gear, it's okay. But every marksman, I think you're better off just focusing on single target rather than trying to make Poison Bomb work. But there are passives here that I'd consider medium priority. Once you've reached a Long Reach, honestly, you've kind of hit the high priority skills checklist. Everything after this, the order doesn't really matter as much, I've found. But skills like Scout, like I previously mentioned, Evasion, Deflection, First Dodge, Getting, Torture. You're probably going to be using Ector if you're running this alignment combination, so Burn will be very readily available, so this would probably be a high priority skill you want to pick up as soon as possible for the combo potential. After that, he has a lot of... He's one of the characters, really, where you have more skill points than you really need, in my experience. Because Gas Trap is terrible. You don't want this. You'll never use it. But you can see here, I have my level 25 Damas. I picked up Gas Trap and some upgrades. I picked up Poison Bomb entirely just because I had the skill points. There was nothing else to spend it on. If instead you'd rather put him into Cover Expert to make that work, that's perfectly fine. Just... as long as you get those high priority ones first, I think you'll notice that your Damas will be performing better as you're leveling, or you'll be just performing better once you switch back to using him in the endgame. Up next is Sir Geraint, the opposite side of the alignment chart. He is the Old Faith rightful alignment locked hero. So you will only be encountering him if you are going with that alignment combination. Geraint has a number of unique skills that really help him stand out, but he really does still have that basic skeleton all the marksmen follow. So, as usual, Poison Arrow, you're going to grab this, the upgrades, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but you're going to grab weak spots. Torture, probably, like I mentioned, probably not a bad one. If you're going to go with Merlin, and you want to use Geraint with him, grab Torture. If you don't plan to use Merlin, you probably want to avoid Torture. Ice Shield is an amazing defensive. It's probably the best defensive skill in the game in a vacuum, and definitely something you're going to want to pick up and all the upgrades on them as they become available, because it helps fix that marksman problem. Now when the enemy ranged units are shooting him, he'll block up to 4 of them before he's actually at risk, and hopefully by then you'll have eliminated those ranged units so they won't keep shooting him after the Ice Shield breaks. The rest of this is just sort of filler, medium priority skills that I've kind of discussed before. Going into Tier 2, this is actually where Geraint's going to kind of differ from the previous ones. All the other ones I usually said go Alchemist first. For Geraint, I think you're going to want to go with Lightning Arrow first. This is a unique skill to him, and it really helps set him apart, because while marksmen currently don't do great damage, this helps him retain usefulness in the form of crowd control. Lightning Arrow can do a pretty sizable sized AoE. It's an expensive skill, 6 AP. But with all the upgrades, this will be doing 100% weapon damage, 50% to additional targets, up to 2 enemies within 2 tiles of him. But with upgrades on this, you'll also be applying shock, increase that damage by 10%, increase that range up to 3 tiles, and up to 3 targets. So this becomes a very wide shock debuff. Very, very good. You're going to want to grab this skill immediately and all the upgrades on them as soon as they become available. After that, I'd actually go with Dash, the upgrades I mentioned, and then Alchemist, and then grabbing these. For me, I generally see Geraint more for his debuff utility and crowd control sort of support more than the damage dealing focus. So I don't find myself using Poisoned Arrow as much because his AP economy is a little more strict because of Lightning Arrow. So you still do use it, but I find myself not using it as much as other marksmen. So basically go left to right here. And then we've reached tier 3. This is the exact same as Sir Damas. I don't want to be super repetitious. Grab long reach, upgrades, and then you circle back for the medium priority skills that I've mentioned before. Next is Sir Yvain, and similar but a bit different. Basically, instead of Poison Arrow, it's Fire Arrow. It's still the first thing you're going to grab. The first upgrade I'd grab on it, though, is Crippling Hit, reducing the AP of enemies. This is going to be an early game skill primarily. 1 AP isn't a whole lot as you get farther in the game, but early on, that 1 AP can make a big difference. So having this type of debuff is actually quite useful. After that, I would add on Greek Fire, increase the burning duration by 1 for a couple reasons. One, the burn damage, the longer it lasts, the more free damage you're getting, so that's useful, and the longer they have that AP penalty. Then grab Heated Arrow. Though this unlocks at level 5, I'd probably grab it as soon as you hit level 5. With Shoot, grab Torture, obviously, because of the self-synergy. Poison is a bit more rare to come across. The only ones that really do poison is going to be Vanguard, so if you're running a Vanguard who has Poison Blades, then sure, use weak spots. But for the most part, you're going to find yourself a little bit pressed to find a Poison setter unless you're using a second Marksman. Bold choice if you are. So you're probably not going to be picking up weak spots until much later into the game. After that, I would probably go with Scout for the movement AP, and Recon, and Evasive, and then Deflection. I don't think it's worth picking up Piercing Shot. It's a absolutely terrible skill. The damage is terrible. The AP cost is not great. I think you're just better off shooting guys individually. This is one of those skills you pick up when you have nothing else to spend skill points on. After that, you make your way to tier 2. First thing here you're going to grab is Dash, along with Sprint and Extended Dash, and then Assassination. I grab Mobility first just because, again, Marksman damage, not amazing, so I think prioritizing their mobility is a bit more important than prioritizing the damage, but either order honestly works fine depending on your personal preference. This is an absolutely amazing passive, one of the best in the game, so just grab all of the upgrades on this as they become available. After that, pick up Pyromania. You're using a Fire Arrow anyways, so if you get some more burn damage out of that, it will be helpful. And I think you should be able to get into tier 3 at this point, but if you can't, I'd grab First Shot. In tier 3, the first thing you want to get is Long Reach and the upgrades I previously mentioned before. And then Rain of Arrows. This is a bad skill. But Marksmen are in such a rough space right now that even though this is a terrible skill, I do think it's a high priority one for Yvain if you're going to be using him. It's because it's his only AoE. The damage is not great, but it's better than like Poison Bomb. It's expensive with a 6 AP cost, and that's with the upgrade, bringing it down to 6 from 7. AoE is just always going to be useful in this game. So not having AoE is a pretty big detriment. So he has a decent AoE in the form of Rain of Arrows, damage-wise. There's a lot of other problems with it, but I'm not going to get into that. So I would pick this up and all of the upgrades that it has to offer. Following that up, grab the other Scout, pick up any upgrades on the first Scout that you're maybe missing, then get Aimed Shot, whatever upgrades really appeal to you. It's a medium priority skill. The only one that I think here that isn't good is Fast Aim. All the rest of them I think are alright. And after that, you'll probably have some leftover skill points. You can pick up whatever low priority stuff you think is the least bad. Cover Expert, Piercing Shot, Hunter. It's really your call. And last but not least, probably, is going to be Dindraine. And she's actually really good for the early game. Better than any of the other marksmen for the early game. And we'll get into why. For her skills, you're going to want to grab Poison Arrow and Fire Arrow first. Without any of the upgrades, you're going to want both of these. Primarily because Poison Arrow can get some decent upgrades later on with Alchemist. We'll get into that later. And Fire Arrow is just going to be useful for the entire game. You're going to want the upgrades I mentioned: Toxic Arrow, Sickness, Greek Fire, and Crippling Hit. And now, she can self-synergize with Weak Spots and Torture. So that's really the reason why you want both of these. I would honestly pick up these base skills and these 2 upgrades for your shoot attack before getting any of the upgrades on either of these skills. The only one that I think is debatable is Crippling Hit. So now she can self-synergize and give herself a bonus 40% weapon damage. And you can really notice the difference. She can really lay down some serious damage for Act 1 and even most of Act 2 with this combo she can enable for herself. And this is honestly where I put all my skill points in Tier 1, is grabbing these 2 skills, the upgrades on them, and then the 2 upgrades for shoot. That's going to be where pretty much all your Tier 1 skill points are going for a while. When you get into Tier 2, you grab Alchemist, as usual, extra damage, Master Poisoner, so now it'll be much easier for you to pretty much guarantee you're getting 2 attacks per turn, with the 3 AP on this and then the 4 AP from either Shoot or Fire Arrow, because you do have to sometimes reposition yourself, and you probably don't have Scout yet. After that, grab Dash with Sprint, Extended Dash, and I'd actually pick up Pyromania here. You're going to be using Burn Arrow a lot to just set up your own combo, so you might as well get the extra damage out of it with your burn damage. And then I'd actually go back for Scout here. Being able to do some repositioning just helps guarantee that you can use 8 AP for 2 attacks if you need to. When you move into Tier 3, long reach as usual, same stuff. Grab Scout, grab Evasion, circle back for things like First Shot, Aimed Shot with these 3 upgrades on them, the rest of the upgrades here on Scout, and Deflection. If you are keeping any Marksman for Soul Merchant builds, things like Adrenaline and Elusive will be useful, but these are very endgame skills. These are very low priority. You're not picking these up until you're like level 24 like this one is, grabbing both of these. So they're mid-priority because it's something you're gonna want, but you're holding off on them. If you have extra skill points, that's when you go into low priority stuff like Poison Bomb, where it's kind of whatever, you're probably not going to use it much, or Cover Expert. And that's all the Marksman. I hope this was useful and my thoughts and explanations were coherent and made sense about why I pick what skills I pick, which ones I think are more important to get sooner rather than later. I think if you follow along with this roughly, I don't think any of my guides really you need to be following to the letter, but if you follow this, at least somewhat loosely, you'll probably notice a bit of a performance uptick with your Marksman if you're bold enough to use them from the start of the game to the end. If you made it all the way through to the end of the video, thank you. I do appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.